So you're welcome to the 10th edition of the Power Dialogue. The election welcomes you. I am Omano Okonkwo, and tonight we'll be discussing a very interesting topic in the off-grid energy sector. And just so you know, this week on August 26th, on Monday, we had the privilege to host a side event at the just concluded Future of Energy conference in Accra, Ghana. And it was fantastic. The panel session we had was focused on e-mobility, mostly 2-3 wheelers. And it was an interesting session, still in the off-grid energy space. And we'd just like you to look out for the video. We're going to be sharing the recording from that session this week. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. David Arinze. He is our moderator for tonight. Please give him a hand as he makes his way to the front.
Warm greetings. Okay, great. So we're just going to take 1-2 minutes to finalize our mic check and ensure that all panelists are properly mic'd. But it's such a pleasure to see you this evening. I am very excited about tonight's topic, and I hope you are as well. I'm sure in the room we have practitioners, mini-grid developers, enthusiasts about SDG 7, people who are not just talking the talk, but walking the talk about bridging, meaningfully bridging the energy access gap we have in rural communities across Nigeria and even across the African continent. And so in the next few minutes, I'll give us a brief background about what we're going to be discussing today. I will introduce our panelists, then I'll give us a quick housekeeping rules, or I might just share it right now. Please, if you have a smartphone, please put it on silent. We don't want that getting to the production. All right, so if you allow me, excellent. So join me with a resounding round of applause as I welcome Mr. Olufemi Akinyelure. He is the head, Nigeria Electrification Project, Rural Electrification Agency. Please, you're welcome, sir. Next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Olu Areoke. He is the country director, Hawks Power Systems. A round of applause. And to the phenomenal woman on our panel, Fauzia Shavon. Please join me in welcoming her. She serves as the Utility Innovation and DRE Specialist at the Global Energy Alliance for People and for Planet. A round of applause, please. Great. All right. Thank you again for joining us for today's session. It's such a pleasure to have you join this 97th Pod Dialogue. And just before I get into the topic of today, anyone who has followed Next Year and the Electricity Hub knows that it takes a lot of work to keep an initiative like this running. And so join me to give a huge round of applause to the Next Year team for keeping this on. 8 years and counting. Today, this event, which is the 97th Power Dialogue, titled Bridging Electrification Gaps in Rural Communities, creates an opportunity for a public discourse that aims to share information and pragmatic ideas about the power sector, advocate policy positions, and highlight investment opportunities in the Nigeria electricity industry. Nigeria's electricity deficit continues to widen due to high energy demand for the ever-growing population of over 200 million people. According to a World Bank report, tracking SG7 and the Energy Progress Report 2024, recently published, shows that 86.3 million Nigerians lack access to electricity as of 2022. This figure accounts for 39% of the country's population, making Nigeria the country with the highest electricity access deficit in the world. This percentage is of unserved and underserved Nigerians in mainly rural communities. Due to the poor grid infrastructure, regulatory, financial, and technological barriers, the gap is still broad. Hence, the government, electricity stakeholders, and developers, development finance institutions, and the private sector have adopted renewable energy solutions to deliver off-grid solutions to these communities. However, it is not devoid of its challenges. Over the years, several interventions and initiatives, including mini grids, solar home systems, by the government, public and private sector, as well as international bodies, have been adopted to close this energy access gap. While the government has set its clear targets to achieve 100% electrification by 2030 through the ongoing though the ongoing initiatives that have been set up must be reviewed, must be discussed, and we must also measure the progress that has been achieved thus far. I must say that I'm delighted to be joined by these esteemed panelists who represent government, private sector, and also the donor community, or I like to call them the enablers of the sector. Everybody's an enabler in their own right. So we'll just get right into the juice of today's conversation. But before we begin to even questions that we have and this dialogue, I would like to reach out to you, Mr. Femi. Just in one word or two, or one or two sentences, how do you do what you do at the REA? What makes you excited about the job you do every day?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us. As we all know, the reason why we have government and the reason why we have jobs here is to ensure that we improve the human condition of our citizens across board. And there's no better way to get that done than to ensure that every citizen has access to power, not bulb, but for productive use to better the quality of lives of the citizens across board. And it's really, I mean, it's a dream to see the smiles on people's faces when this happens, not just in communities, but across sectors. In the health sector, you hear of stories that it's the difference between life and death in a lot of situations. So it's really serious. And I mean, that's what keeps us going, especially at the REA every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Fauzia, please.
Thank you very much. I'll just start by saying it's a pleasure to be here. I think the last time I was here was over a year ago, almost two, and I was the moderator at the time. And interestingly, had the former head of PMU, HPMU, Anita from IRE, and then Mr. Frank at UKNAF. So I just wanted to appreciate the Electricity Hub for the opportunity to be here this time, but now as a panelist. So yes, for me, I think it's just, first of all, the fact that, I'm living the realities of, the power situation. I'm pretty sure we all know where it hurts. And this has been a journey for me for the past almost about 14 years now in the sector. And I initially started, not really realizing, I was quite unaware of the realities, if so to say, because I was in the, power plants, more upstream, and that's just putting power on the grid. So yes, you do know that you don't have access, you don't have reliable power in your house, but you don't. I didn't really know the realities of unserved communities, a lot of people that haven't even had the opportunities, that we have. So over the course of my career, now I began to understand, the full value chain and really the realities of energy access and how that impacts economic empowerment. So for me, it's really, being a part of solving what we are all living with. That's kind of what keeps me going. And I know a lot of my colleagues over time have always said, "Oh, you speak so passionately." But I'm like, well, what do you expect? If we solve this, then we've solved a lot of issues. That's the summary. Energy is like the bedrock of every other thing that exists within us. So that's in a nutshell why I'm doing this work.
Thank you. That's phenomenal. Olu?
Um, I think for me, I've been here once, but it feels great to be back and having been around the sector for the last 7 years, straight out of business school. And then I said, what would I do after business school? Coming back home, and I joined an enabler, RMI, and then started running in the bush. Today, I continue to run in the bush. Forget how I'm dressed, but the work is in the bush. But it's millions and millions of Nigerians without access to the grid. To some of us, it might seem like, what are we saying? Is this even true? Yes, it is. And we have seen first time when power goes into these communities as first infrastructure before even financial services, before even healthcare, before even road network, before even phone network, before even internet. And you see what transformation happens over time. At Husk, we've been operational in the country for the last 4.5 years, operating now almost what maybe in a few weeks to come, the largest fleet of mini grids by any mini grid developer in this country. It is tough work, but like I said on national TV a few weeks ago, who is going to do it if we all walk away? We have to find a way to continue to do it. We have to find a way to continue to ensure that our brothers and sisters living in these areas where our food comes from, where our natural resources are, have power to be able to live better lives, ensure their lifestyles improves, and ensure their livelihoods improve. And that way, what we are creating is thriving rural economies that could be the next Aba, the next Lagos, the next Benin, the next Abuja, the next Kano, and that is how this country will develop. Thank you and for having me here.
Thank you so much. If you listen to them very carefully, you see that all of them have said energy access is an enabler. And whether you're talking about education or health or industries, energy access is what is critical to ensure that we can scale socioeconomic growth in our country. And I would just like to ask you, Mr. Femi, give an overview, of the government and developers, financiers, and private sector initiative that currently is running um, to bridge the energy access gap, within the sector today. Studio?
Hello? Hello? Okay.
Okay.
So within the power sector, as we know, you have the grid and the off-grid. So in terms of what the REA does, as the REA, we have a lot of grid extension projects, but for the sake of this meeting, we'll speak to just the off-grid aspect. And in that context, I like to take things from really where we started a few years ago or 4 years ago or over, where the off-grid ecosystem was really non-existent. So what we were able to do is essentially market creation end to end, right? From the developers to the financiers and ensuring that you're able to create that market confidence. Even those who received these solar systems back in the day didn't even, I remember my dad saying, this thing doesn't work. I'd rather just have the generator where I could buy diesel and everything. But over time, that has changed drastically. And that has taken painstaking effort from both government in terms of ensuring that the right policies are in place. Financiers won't come into any space if it's unstable. We've been able to ensure that not just having the right policies in place, but ensuring also that government, acts from the front in terms of ensuring that programs such as, I'll give an example, programs such as the Energizing Education Phase 1. I mean, that program today, for me, probably the biggest success story because through that project, DFIs such as the World Bank saw something in terms of government's drive towards clean, sustainable power. That led us to the first agreement, and this is probably something people don't really know. That led us to the first agreement of the NEP, the first 350 that the World Bank brought. So a lot of the times, what people want to see is governments, that political will. Are they really serious? And that goes back to the stability in the sector, knowing that government has skin in the game and would ensure that you create that enabling environment to keep things going. We've also had very wonderful developers who have been able to take that risk in this. I mean, just diving into the deep end and see where we end up,
takes them.
right? Where it takes them.
Absolutely.
But I would say that a lot of them haven't regretted that decision today because they are essentially the continental ambassadors, right? Because I believe that in Nigeria being the giant of Africa is really the template for the whole of Africa. So we have developers right now who we are trying to take up that ladder to become renewable energy service companies that can deploy at scale, because scale is where we see the sustainability in future. We don't want to wake up one day, look back, and see that sites are abandoned or see that things are breaking down. And the last part is the financiers, right? And it goes back to that stability. I always say that as financiers, if we want to keep doing things the same old ways, we won't move forward. This country really cannot grow faster than the footprint of its energy access, right? So we need to ensure that even as the government looks inward to see how we can de-risk this ecosystem, the financiers are also willing to take a bit of risk, take that risk up, have a bit more risk appetite. And in the last few years, we have seen more and more and more of that coming into play. And that really is going to drive the sector because from where we stand, subsidies can't last forever. And we have to find a scientific way of withdrawing that subsidy and allowing the market to run on its own. For now, I think I'll stop there. And,
Thank you so much. And I know that there are a couple other initiatives in the cooler, but we'll leave that for later in the conversation. Fauzia, please, as GIAP, what initiatives are you seeing that are shaping things in the sector?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I would kind of lean on to what Femi already said. So largely, we have those, would I say, most initiatives are around three major modes of electrification. You know, you have the solar, well, standalone systems, you have mini grids, and then you have grid extension. And from where I'm sitting, mini grids has largely been at the forefront to some extent, and it's not so surprising because, of course, mini grids are quite modular. They allow for some level of innovation. Several business models can easily integrate into mini grid systems, and then they're just quite, I'll say, largely practical. A practical approach to tackling the energy access issues that we have. So around that, for us at GIAP, a lot of our initiatives have some level of support towards mini grids, but largely also towards the government. And basically, GIAP is an alliance, and it was formed in COP26 based on institutional knowledge and initial capital from the Rockefeller Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, the Earth Fund, and very recently MasterCard Foundation as well. And what that's supposed to do. So the key features of philanthropic capital, I would say, is somewhat nimble, it's agile, so can move faster than maybe traditional capital. It's also very catalytic in nature. So a lot of the work that we do is how to catalyze investments So just establishing that, and then one more thing, and that speaks to what Femi had said in terms of risk and how to catalytic capital is largely its tolerance for risk is pretty high. So we're able to go where people may not want to go to at the beginning. So based on that, a lot of our initiatives are around these core, let's say, features and concepts. So in Nigeria, we are currently we have 3 dimensions of our work. One is strengthening enabling environments, and that's essentially TA to the government. For instance, we are funding the Energy Transition Office through SE for All. That's just one. Another example of our work is the Africa Markets Initiative, which is, and I can talk about that in the course of the conversation. And then a couple of other activities around enabling environment. The second layer of our work is facilitating innovation and entrepreneurship, and that's the private sector focused work. So, for instance, we have the aggregated procurement platform, a couple of other activities that are sort of like pilots and all of that. We have the Energizing Agriculture program as well that we're doing with REA and RMI. Then the third layer, and that's the final layer, is deploying risk capital. And as I mentioned earlier, that's supposed to mobilize funding, that's supposed to unlock investments, basically crowding more investments so we can scale the market. So, for instance, we have a facility that we launched last year with Chapel Hill Denham, and that's a local currency debt facility called a TAFA. That's just one of the examples of what we are doing. So I'll probably stop here, but largely, as you said earlier, we are looking for our main focus is to enable the market, is to test and show so that more people can come in and then we can scale the market. So that's largely, but ultimately all our initiatives are around energy access and energy transition, building on accelerating renewable energy to ensure that there's inclusive economic development in low and middle income countries like Nigeria.
Thank you, thank you. And as you said, local currency financing. I saw a couple developers in the room nod their heads. I'm not trying to preempt anything. Oh, I have a hallelujah in Olu. Olu, please, let's get to it. What's your thoughts on this question as well?
I think it's great to have to answer after them because, see, Nigeria has got a few things right, which is why companies like ourselves are here. Firstly, was the policy for mini grids in 2016, and I'm not sure most people know, but that policy was taken from Bihar in India, maybe word for word, and then tweaked. And Bihar is the state where Husk originated from. So we already saw quite a few things happening in the market as far back as 2016. Fast forward to now, that policy or that regulations has now been reviewed for the first time. It has been tested and has worked. So policy and regulations is right. That is the first bedrock. The second bedrock is what Fauzia was alluding to, catalytic capital and enablers like, GRP, RMI and the likes, and what they continue to do through the EAP and other programs, which Husk and other developers have been a part of. Now, we think at Husk that the sector has got to a place where policy behind our back, ensuring that stability remains, and then catalytic capital. And then it is now time for us to begin to look at what and how we can begin to scale at speed. And when I say scale at speed, it is no more doing one mini grid, which is what we were doing 6 to 8 years ago, or even 10 mini grids. Now we need to start talking of hundreds of mini grids and thousands of mini grids affecting hundreds of thousands of lives and millions of lives. That is how the problem will get solved. Again, remember what I've said, the foundation is right, policy and regulations, catalytic capital continues to come in. And like Femi had said, the grants, the good thing now, the grants keep coming, but they will not get us where we need to get to. And that is why a company like us continuously, and that's why I was waving my hand, continuously looking at how we can attract more capital. Last year, we raised $100 million for border operations in Asia and Africa, two-thirds of that funding coming to Nigeria and other expansion about to happen in other parts of Africa. But what we see as the first company to raise that large amount of equity and debt at Series D level is that now we even need much more, right? And what we've kind of got into as a sector with all of policy catalytic capital deploying now at, I would say tens and going into hundreds, I think this is the right time for this sector to actually say, look, we're taking off, and which is also what Femi alluded to, Resco's coming into the game to say, we are committing to this country megawatts of power to be deployed within the next few years. We did that a few months ago with the REA, committing just 5%, over 5% of what total generation capacity is coming from the country to be deployed in this country within the next few years. That is the part we want to see. That is the part we need to toe. And when the World Bank has said that mini grids remain the lowest cost effective option for electrifying millions of Nigerians and Africans without power, it is true. And everything is right. And I think this moment could not be better to be able to say, this is scale, this is hundreds of mini grids, this is thousands of mini grids, this is millions of Nigerians now electrified with reliable power able to improve their lives and livelihoods.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And just thinking about on the backdrop of what you said about this, you've just shared a lot of data, and just before I ask my next set of questions around data and it's important on research for the sector, I'd just like to mention this is a dialogue, friends. And so we have people in the room who will be glad to receive your questions. And if you'll be happy to ask your questions in the course of the dialogue, we'll be happy to receive them. We recognize that some people are joining us virtually. Please feel free to ensure that you also send your questions to us and we'll try our best to answer them. We are here because of you. Thank you. And so, Fauzia, if I may, what are the strategies for employing adequate research for tailored electrification solutions in rural areas? And what would you say from your lens that you have seen as the best practices?
Thanks for that. So I would, so when we talk about research, so first of all, I'll start with the sector has definitely progressed in, and just as you mentioned. So over a decade ago, I was in the UK doing some study program, and my thesis was around, renewables. Do some assessments and basically investigating public perception, but also RE and a couple of these technologies, but also comparing between Nigeria and the UK. That was largely my topic and my project. And it was a nightmare, getting data. There was nothing. Checking online, I barely got any substantial information. And in fact, most of the information back then, and this is like I said a decade ago, were largely negative. People really talking about streetlights, the solar streetlights. That those were the early days of solar in Nigeria, and it was all substandard. So that was kind of data I was getting, and I was really struggling with my thesis at the time. But then now, when I look at how the sector has evolved, and this is the work of everyone, the governments, REA and the ministries, developers, as Femi said, that have been now basically even on LinkedIn, I can get all the information I need. There's accessibility down to to government officials. Social media has helped. All of these platforms, even where we are right now, the Power Dialogue has helped to bridge that gap, and you're able to get sufficient data. I wouldn't mind going back to school at this point because I imagine that my study would be a walkover because there's everything I need. So largely, and I said that because of course for us to recognize that we have progressed, but also importantly, it's the role of data is basically research, and research is basically looking like investigating a subject matter, investigating a topic, your research questions, and all of those things, you're trying to solve a problem in a nutshell. So what I've seen is even all of the work that we are doing in terms of energy access and rural electrification is largely based on some research. So very recently there was the state of the mini grids report that was launched by the SC for All and the rest of the colleagues, and we've already gotten a lot of information around how costs are declining, and mini grid installation has increased by 6 times since 2018, and as Olu said about the mini grid regulation and a lot that has happened since then. So largely most of the initiatives and everything we're doing is based on some data somewhere telling us about trends, outlook, benchmark cost, and all of those things. So that's one thing that is established, and that is what is feeding into a lot of the programs and initiatives that we now design. For instance, even a GAP or a World Bank or an IRA based on that. So that's one. Now, from what I see and some of the I would say the strategies that I have found to be very solid is some level of applied research, if I can say that, research in action, basically, and that's in a nutshell. That's essentially pilots and demonstration projects. I find that to be very solid. Yes, the reports are fantastic, and actually, even the pilots and demonstration projects feed into these reports that we need to basically is a feedback loop, I would say. So that's a strategy that I found very solid, and everyone sitting here, the governments, development partners like GAP and developers have been doing a lot of that already. But as Olu said, of course, we need to go beyond that and scale for those kind of demonstration projects, because that's what makes you investigate what business model makes sense. You're trying to find out the proof points in the economics of whatever model it is. You're basically getting data from a pilot. And I'll give an example. Maybe I'll use the EAP program that we've been running. That's one of it. And what in fact, just before earlier today, there was a draft study of, and I think that will be out probably in a couple of days. And this has been, and I'm sure Olu can speak even more about what they've learned from it. But we were talking earlier before the session started about a lot of lessons that are coming out of these pilots. Basically, really affirming that productive use is a significant part of how we increase or improve the viability of mini grids. That alone is helpful for whoever else that needs to come in. You're getting information. For instance, some of the things I saw in the initial the study draft is how in certain communities or in rural communities, for instance, averagely they spend less than $2 a month, on like to purchase power. So if you're doing that, and that kind of means 9 kilowatts hour a month. And then if you break that down, it's like, turning on your bulb for 5 hours a day, 60-watt bulb. So just to bring that into, and so what economic activity can you really do with, just turning on your power for 6 hours a day? So those kind of insights are very relevant, and that is what I see as a solid strategy to research and the data that comes out of it. Because once you have that out there, then an REA can say, okay, we're going to do this tender to, for instance, appliance financing or whatever, or entrepreneurship. It can be even a GAP saying, okay, let's find a way to scale. In fact, as a matter of fact, the work that we've been doing, in partnership with RMI and REA on this EAP is already feeding into the program that's supposed to scale the insights that we've gotten and champion a lot of business models that we have. At least we have data to show that they are working or they have great potential. So that's that catalytic effect to scaling the market, and that's one of the strategies that I wanted to highlight here as a research strategy, I would say, to help the market.
Brilliant. We have a follow-on question for you on that, but we'll get to that follow-on question in the course of the discourse.
Okay.
Olu, how do you ensure adequate research is employed to determine the suitable renewable energy models for each project area?
I think, you know,
We're not asking for your trade secret, but just give us some insight.
no, I don't think anything is trade secret if it helps us to scale. So I think for Husk, first, our business model is slightly different. While, you know, if you people look at productive use as a means of utilization for the grid, we actually look at it as part of our business model, meaning that we would sell on and finance appliances to homes and businesses as they come. What this does is, is you picture a small child, you're showing them for the first time what reliable power means. They're going to want more. What Husk wants to do at that time is to be the one to say, yes, you want more, here is more. And when we provide guidance directly to the customers and the communities on how to use the power, both for home use and for businesses to also grow. That way, we're creating an economy that is productive and paying for the services that we are provided. A third leg of our business, or a third, is rural CNI, where we identify maybe standalone processing hubs or whatever, give them standalone solutions, maybe where the mini grid cannot reach, whereby what we're now doing is powering you at your home and then at your business. So you are in the day, you're your business, you're making income, and home you come home to relax. You're served by the same person. And to do some of these things, in my past life, when I joined the sector, two things that will always make mini grid successful: the engagement with relevant stakeholders and the location. Right? If you miss those two things, there's no technology. There's no. I mean, technology can help you to an extent, but those two things are the bedrock for successful mini grid deployment. And we've been very, very strategic with those two things. There's a top-down, bottom-up approach with managing different stakeholders, from governments to even the kid that is born today in that community. They will one day become your core stakeholder. And then being able to realize, and I've always said it, mini grids will not go everywhere. It is not designed to go everywhere. There are parts that mesh grids, solar home systems, grid expansion will play. And that is why what the REA and the government is doing by having an integrated plan. If you look at that plan closely, you see a lot of designs to say, look, in this area we would expand the grid. In this area, we think solar home systems should go there. And that data, even though a lot of people say Nigeria's data is very unreliable, maybe, but has been very helpful in pointing players like us in the right direction of where to go. The rest of the job from there on is for us to do, meaning we have to put boots on the ground, understand who's there. Every Nigerian village is different from the next one. So being able to take whatever data or guidance from partners like GIAP and RIA and SE for all as well, and then begin to say, okay, now we've got guidance, we need to get boots on the ground and look at what locations we can go and who is there, what are they even doing there. Then it begins to fit into, yes, we should go there, or no, we should not go there. Those are the kind of ways research continues to help us. And in terms of also helping with productive use, you cannot run away from that. Technologically, a lot of the appliances that are coming these days, and the productive use appliance space in for mini grids is still a bit fragmented, because a lot of the equipments don't still understand how, or the OEMs don't still understand how to provide or manufacture these things to fit what the mini grid, how the mini grid can power them. So that's still a conversation that is ongoing. But with time and with continuous trials, if I may use that word, funded by folks like GIAP and supported by RIA, then it makes sense to try and fail and then find out what works and then begin to take it and run.
Scale it.
What we are doing now, from lessons from this kind of programs, EAP, DART, and the like, is taking what we've learned and running with it. That failure time is maybe a bit over. I'm not saying there won't be failure, some failures ahead, but largely there is now a foundation, trials, and the developments that have happened in the last few years to continue to now run.
Interesting. And just talking about at least keep on doing, because as you keep on doing, you begin to discover ways, better ways of doing it. Any developer in the room will agree with me that the way they did their first mini grid is not the way they have done other mini grids after that. Do I have a witness? Excellent. So we keep on improving by doing, and my next question to you, Femi, how is NEP ensuring research in deploying electrification projects in Nigeria?
So I'll take that question from where Olu stopped in terms of the integrated energy planning tool. What the Electricity Act had essentially done was to decentralize, the electricity market and give states more of a prominent role. That in itself has created a lot of opportunities in the space. From a period where discos were taking REA to court almost every day, to a period where
They're not
discos,
shaking hands.
discos have now presented over 600 sites for the interconnected mini grids. We see that things are moving and things are evolving the right way. So there's that understanding as well in the sector that, look, the off-grid space can really complement what the grid is doing. And the off-grid is the way that the grid itself would be upgraded organically, scientifically. If you look at the way the interconnected mini grids are even structured and designed. And I guess that understanding was built on the bedrock of data. They've seen it work over the last few years. They probably in the first year said, don't worry, they'll start, they'll soon. But that fire kept burning, right? Up to the stage where the World Bank has now committed the largest amount to any decentralized project in the world, right? So something is working. And I keep saying that data helps us to really quantify what the issues are, and we're able to measure impact across board. We're able to also design projects better, model projects better, knowing the right grant amounts that goes into any round or a mini grid round or anything has to take into account what has happened over time. Um, Occurrences happening again and again and again builds a trend that needs to be studied scientifically to go back into that model to see how you can make things better. And this goes across board, not just from government, but if you're looking at a financier, for example, if you're looking deeply into a sector, right, you need to use that data to sort of improve your due diligence process. You're not asking for an arm and a leg anymore because you've seen how things have evolved. You've seen how other people are coming up with very innovative financing tools, right? To see how it's, I mean, we spoke about blended financing earlier. In other words, talking about the local financing. Going back to data again, I mean, various things that have just, come up to me in the past few months. I've had various conversations with members of my team that we need to really take advantage of the gold mine of data that we have to improve the space. If we don't continue to evolve, people will leave us behind. So I'll give you a few examples. Like we're speaking about productive use of equipment. So how did productive use even come up in the first place? Maybe we don't ask ourselves these questions. In solving one issue, you probably bring up another issue somewhere. It's because we realize that the capacity utilization of mini grids were very low. So we decided to essentially bringing in those productive use equipment would help to increase that. But what you do in communities where a lot of the members of the community are using mechanical equipment. So you're telling me to change from my mechanical equipment to an electrical equipment and start paying. I'd rather stay with my mechanical equipment. I mean, other things have come up where it says that a developer doesn't want to get involved in that productive use space because there are companies that do this as a service.
Absolutely.
So data has also then showed us that the way to go forward is what Olu made mention of, putting that in your business plan from the get-go. That creates a platform for partnership between the developer and the guy that wants to do this as a service. I'll go further, I'll go deeper down to say productive use of equipment in the sense, was it the right way of defining it or just saying productive use of energy? Right? Because productive use of energy now broadens your horizon. You're
Horizon, yeah.
looking into even the agricultural sector. So looking at agriculture, you're able to say, look, smallholder farmers, they want this solar irrigation pumps, they want all this equipment in bits and pieces that you can deploy to those areas. What the big agro processing farms need, they need standalone power because they already have the equipment, they can already afford it, and they're probably burning diesel on a daily basis. So we need to move them into cleaner forms of power. What drives food costs the most is the transportation. So are we bringing in more cleaner sources of transportation, trying to encourage EVs into that space? And I'll just go to a last layer of, the significance of this data is subsidy had been removed and there was a lot of focus on transportation. But no, we're not sitting back to realize that it's the guys in the markets that really affect the country's GDP, that use this I better pass my neighbor generators, which they power using this same PMS. So the removal affects them even more than we think. So shouldn't we be focusing on cleaner ways of powering this market, increasing our GDP? You are putting more disposable income in their hands rather than saying you are giving them cash or anything. They're able to expand. It has a direct impact on the economy. So, I can't overemphasize the importance of data and research in the work that we do.
Thank you so much for those responses. But one thing I also see is as we begin to talk about where we were, where we are, and where we are heading to, you begin to see that there will be a lot of data, accessible data. How do we balance between availability of data and data protection? Those two concepts need to go hands in gloves.
I think in terms of data protection, it's something government really has to take the lead in. And developers also we have to have that handshake with the developers also, because I have, there are a few cases here and there where developers don't want to give you as much information
That you want.
as you want. And one thing they fail to realize is, as government, our job, as I said, is to improve that ecosystem for you. So if you are hoarding information I need to make your business better, it doesn't make any sense. And then you are a lot more, accessible to other people to access that data that will probably commercialize that data on your behalf. So it's for me, it's a thing of understanding. And for government also, we need to learn to try and decentralize this data capture, data processing. For example, the IEP tool. We can't sit in Abuja today and continue and think that we're going to be able to update that IEP tool on our own from REA alone. So it takes a lot of capacity building also, education, sensitization, right? I think that's really, really, really because not every state also has the right capacity. So we need to ensure that all the states have the right capacity. States are able to upgrade that tool, the way we want it to be updated. Also, the authenticity of data is very important. Not just feeding in just any kind of data,
Yeah.
but ensuring that the right kind of data,
Accuracy as well.
yeah, accuracy is fed in. And I think through the agreements, data sharing agreements that we have, all of that covers the whole protection aspect of it. So I wouldn't really want to go into the legalese, but just logic and how data can help, this ecosystem thrive.
Brilliant.
That's
Thank
really what
you.
it is.
Thank you, Fauzia.
So I couldn't agree more with Femi, to be honest. He literally said that's about it. What I think the main question is, why do I need the data? And for different stakeholders, they may require different categories of data. So I'll give an example for GAP now. Like I mentioned earlier, where are we here? Of course, it's to support the Nigerian government to achieve their priorities around energy access and transition. But then also, how do we measure success? We're here to support Nigeria, but what are the metrics that we use to that also informs our work and how we tailor further support? So, for instance, carbon emissions reduction. We have a target of averting 4 billion tons of. We have another one around access. We have another around jobs, and then we have mobilization. That means funds mobilization. That's the catalytic part of, if we put X amount, should also catalyze X amount or Y amount. So already on that high level, these are the data points that speak to this. We will definitely need that. And if you need funding from a particular entity, then largely you want to be able to speak their language, because that's what drives their own engine to bring more. Then, and whatever they are doing at that point is to scale the market, is like Femi said, it's ecosystem building. So we need as much data as possible to inform the market so that decisions can be made around policies, regulation. So, and I know that a lot of this, even in terms of exchanging with, and Femi talked about stakeholder collaboration, that's very significant. I'll give an example of the mini regulation that Olu spoke about, that was amended and reviewed last couple of years back. There's definitely public consultation that happens. That's exchanging and getting information to make sure that the amendment speaks to the challenges that developers are facing and whoever else is facing. So I think until we come to that realization that it's for the good of everyone, because if we solve certain problems, then we don't have to we can move to other problems. There are a lot of problems that we have to solve. So that we're all in this together, the better for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Olu.
I think I'm going to speak on behalf of fellow developers like ourselves. I mean, from government standpoint, they need the data to make decisions. GAP also and other enablers need the data, but developers like ourselves, do we even have enough capacity to be able to aggregate and provide that data to you? Maybe no. This is where network is non-existent or poor. You're trying to reach me to give you data. Yes, I might have the data, but do I have capacity or capability internally to be able to help drive that data need for the ecosystem? My suggestion or our suggestion would be, and we've spoken a bit about capital. It is not just now capital to deploy the locations or for PUE. It is capital to develop the capacities within the companies to understand what data. In fact, it's not just data for governments to make decisions or for funders to make decisions. It is also data for business decisions now, right? So if I may use this medium on behalf of fellow developers, maybe we need some technical assistance as the DES program is being launched, as the new GR programs are being launched, to help us build capacity to be able to leverage data. On the part of host, maybe this is not ideally a challenge for us because, have our own in-house IoT systems and stuff like that, and maybe a bit more advanced. But for the entire sector and the roles that we want to continue to play, data will make, will show the right pathway for governments, for funders, for developers to go. And it is right that while government continues to build capacity on its own, the funders have the capacity, the tech leg of that equation, we, the developers, also have the capacity to be able to support what data management and data needs the sector needs.
Excellent. So, from what you're saying, clearly we need to think around a special sort of support support to developers that enable them, one, gather data. I'm happy that my development partners are already taking notes. It's really exciting to see. One beautiful thing about the next year dialogue is that you have people who not just walk the talk, just like to talk, but actually walk the talk, and that's what we have here. Just before we begin to attempt to take a bit more deep dive into finance and how to attract financing within the ecosystem and meaningful stakeholder engagement. I just want to read the room. Is there anyone? I've been receiving questions from the online audience, but other people in the room who have one or two questions, can I see your hands? Okay, I see the gentleman. One, two, three. Great. We've noted you. We'll get back to you shortly. Just as we talk about, as we begin to talk about financing, how do we attract financing? Olu, I'll start with you on this one. You made me very excited by saying, hey, we've raised money, and one thing about Olu, if you know him, he's quite audacious about what and very, very happy about what he does. We raise money for a living. And if you have case studies even across other clients, please share.
Um, I come from also giving a background of also actually funding companies. I used to work for a company that funded one of the, EV companies in this country. And I'll tell you one thing about raising finance: it is tough. I mean, it's not a walk in the park, right? So you have to have everything right. But first rule about raising money from a former financial perspective, given debt equity, is the team who would do the work, right? What is the capacity and how would they be able to do the work? But and coming to Husk, I mean, raising the amount we raised last year, it took a long time coming from when we had raised Series C, I think in 2018, even way before I joined Husk. I tell you for free that maybe I spoke to 20 um, 20 potential funders, took them to my locations, and showed them the work we do, because they, of course, at that point in time, it is show and prove, right? And it was also about, not just the work we do, but all the stakeholders we're working with internally, externally, and them seeing that a lot of things were rightly in place for the company at that level to be able to utilize this money when it comes. Ideally, again, going back as a financier, that is what I would want to see, that, all internal and external engagements are in right order, and is I right order, that if I bring out this 5 naira, 5 million, 100 million, it can be utilized to get to where it needs to get to. Unfortunately also, and I speak to the startup ecosystem in Nigeria, fundraising is usually not associated rightly. It is associated with the street balance cash out. Unfortunately, that is not it. Once you raise funding, you go into what it is called execution mode. That is the toughest part, to be able to say, my run rate that I committed to whoever gave me this funding has to happen. And it is at that point in time that you look back and say, okay, maybe I shouldn't have raised this funding. Because you're giving all sorts of KPIs, everything of that nature. But it is beautiful to go through the process of fundraising and then come out of it and say, look, I'm going on into execution, to come out to show that what I said I would do in the process of raising that funding, I am now doing it, and now I need more. And maybe we're also getting there, and to GAP, to REA, please, we need more money. The one we had a few months ago, we have been doing it, and now we need to do more. So that's the life cycle, right? You get it, you move, you come back again, you say, look, I've done and I can do more because of this, give me more. And that's how you continue to move. But it is always to continue to move, like you said before. Once you stop, then the funding also stops and the work stops. But you keep trying to move and keep moving. That's why you hear companies and startups or pre-seed or 500,000, they stop $1 million is A, they continue again. Next thing you hear, oh, Series B, $10 million. Because you have to continue. The day you stop, it stops. That's the unfortunate thing about fundraising. But it is great to get that funding and be able to continue to do the work and see the impact from that work for us.
Great. Thank you so much. So, message to any developer in the room: you must keep looking for money. You don't let that momentum stop. And I think the excitement comes when you raise some, you want to raise more. And you just keep on raising. Just coming to we have two questions here. What are the strategies NEP is putting in place to attract more financing? We recognize the successes recorded so far, and we're really excited to see what we have on the ground. But I'm sure NEP wants more, and NEP is taking tangible steps to facilitate much more investment. So, what are those strategies that you want to share that NEP is doing, and how does it intend to ensure that this financing it's closing is able to meaningfully advance electricity access across the nation?
Thank you for that question. If you look at the quantum or the size of the energy access gap, you would know that we need a lot more to get to even scratch the surface. But in its design, the way the World Bank funds are, they're essentially catalytic funds. So from the 750, for example, how do we ensure 1.5 billion comes in from the private sector? And this is the standpoint from which we are driving the DARES program in that regard. So while, yes, the data would show that the NEP was successful because we've been able to meet all the KPIs and even surpass the KPIs, we will continue to get the funds for sure because of that success story. But what's going to sustain that success story is the developers, really. They are the core of everything. So understanding that and seeing their pain points, created that design for us going into the days. The ability for developers to raise that early stage project development financing was really a huge bottleneck for a lot of developers. That sort of funding affects the success rate, of a lot of these projects. We spoke about also raising local financing. Local financing today is our war rate. I'm sure we all know it's not sustainable. So how do we blend some of this, use the finance guys who say first loss capital and blend that to ensure that the rates come down? And how does that capital stack look in terms of the debt, senior debt, junior debt, equity? Finance guys, I'm saying the right things.
It's beginning to sound like secondary school prefects are there.
So we've really gone deep into ensuring that looking past the 750 and looking past all the obviously project design and all of that, ensuring all of that is in place, how do we ensure that developers are able to access this financing a lot faster as required? So I'll give an example. When we go through our own due diligence with the developers, we realize that after signing grant agreement, they always have to go through a whole new process with all these financiers, right? And we feel at this stage, we've done this quite a number of times now for us and the financiers to be able to sit down and say, look, what are you looking for? What do you require? It's not rocket science. Sometimes we tend to look at these finance guys when they bring all the big grammar as if it's not surmountable. But when you break these things down, it's really not rocket science. So how can I harmonize my due diligence processes with yours to ensure that anybody that passes this due diligence, yes, I know you have a board. Yes, I know you still have to do some, but it won't take as long to cross that line.
And we reduce the time.
And you reduce the time because time is everything in this space also. We've also focused on developing a facility called the DRE Enhancement Facility with our partners InfraCredit, who have really done a lot with a lot of the developers in the room as well. And what's this facility even meant to do? Even looking past raising the financing is ensuring that we build capacity, just like Olu said, even for the developers themselves. The right corporate governance within your company would ensure that you are able to raise the amount of money that Husk has raised, right? That sensitization, that capacity building. I'm not saying anything to Olu, but I'm sure there are a few local partners that we have that have more mini grids running, but wouldn't even get to the surface of raising as much money as they did. So asking ourselves those questions, again, going back to the data, what are we not doing right, has led us to that fact to be able to handhold with the developers, to be able to give them that capacity that they need. So the DES is going to be heavy on that. We're funding that. And we are also looking at the development partners as well, that we need more grants to
Everybody's looking for money.
to drive that space and ensure that we have, most importantly, a very sustainable ecosystem. That's really, the meat of it for us.
And how do we ensure that while on one hand, I mean, it's brilliant that we're looking at whatever funds that have been closed, at least catalyze minimum 2x and much more. How do we ensure that this trickles down to meaningful electrification, gap bridging? How do we ensure that we bridge that electrification in the country through this program,
So
especially coming from an REA lens?
yes, so I tend to answer this from two ends, two sides. So while we want to ensure that the rural guys, the real rural guys, get the benefits of this access programs, we need to also look at the commercial viabilities and see how we can support from that end and expand. So again, examples that I see is, if, for example, Husk in its portfolio, the more they build that portfolio, the more they are able to expand into areas that were not as commercially viable, and they have more capital to be able to inject some productive activities in those communities. So you're doing two things. You're solving the energy access gap, you're creating livelihoods for those people. Also, I look at a lot of the way we use this data as well. And just coming to the development partners, I don't feel we've been able to really define or get a good methodology of what access really means. What do you define as access? Is it counting the metering points? Or if I do a hospital that thousands of people get benefit from, how do you count that access? I do a university that hundreds of thousands of students come to every year, and we count that as one
Connection.
point, one connection. So it's, we need to balance the arguments, because it is through this viable projects that companies would be able to build their balance sheets to be able to extend that power to these rural communities. If we are stuck in trying to do it from that end back to this end, the ecosystem might just get so stressed at some point that it breaks down, right? But we need to meet somewhere in the middle. And we need to ensure that that is not lost in whatever we're doing. So that's why in the DARES also you would see that things like the interconnected mini grids are things that we're really bringing to the fore to try and drive this scale that we really require. And I'm sure that will then filter into the other areas. We're also looking at various sectors like we've just spoken about in terms of economic clusters, agro-processing and the agriculture, and also even now delving into a bit of e-mobility. If that, I mean, yes, we are e-mobility. So yeah, that's my fault.
Thank you so much. That has really been, very, very extensive, and it's very helpful to understand how you as government are thinking about it, because it's very critical as a prime mover, of course, being supported by other stakeholders. And Fauzi, to you, um, within the world of facilitating finances sector, there are different concepts that are being thought about, locally, globally, that countries can begin to consider, just beyond just development partners. It'll be great to hear your thoughts on that. And on the other hand, we'd like to hear from you. How do you think that governments, donors can engender accountability and effective use of these resources that have been provided to them?
Thanks a lot for that. So I would start with looking at attracting, sort of saying how do we attract more funding and then utilize it effectively. So I'll start with attracting investments. So largely, I would say money will go where it come back. Largely, as ABC. When you put out money, you want it to come either at the same amount, or you want addition, but you definitely don't want to lose your money. And I think that's across board for anyone that's dropping money, even money that seems like it's, sometimes people think, oh, philanthropic capital is, free and whatever, but it's about value for money, and value means different things to different people. So an impact investor is probably really more keen on environmental and social impacts of what their money is. A private sector person is thinking about profitability or market share or whatever. Government is ensuring that the people they serve and taxpayers' money is used for what it's supposed to use to improve the lives of the people. So it cuts across, it basically differs. That's the first thing. So, and largely when we say, okay, money should go out and come back, that's basically reducing the risk of it not coming back. So it's risk and returns. If we de-risk further, then the likelihood the possibility of more funding coming in is heightened, because people are sure that once they drop, they'll get back their returns. So how can that happen, or how can we continue to enable that? And I think all parties have a role to play: governments, the development partners, and developers. And I think Femi has spoken a lot about what, for instance, IRA is doing, policy and regulatory frameworks. And that speaks to also the second question in terms of accountability, because there's a place for regulations, policies. Femi has spoken about the plans, the strategy implementation plan has also been worked on. That's very, very important. Those policy statements, basically showing the commitment of, for instance, governments in championing whatever initiatives or energy access activities. So getting that signal across to the funding market or the financing market and all that is very important. But then on top of that is also the implementation of it. And that speaks to also your second question. Approval process is streamlined. There's one thing to have the policy and documents. Well, what are the how to activate those plans and concrete plans? And I think the government is doing fantastic work on that right now. But when you look at also going out, sometimes anytime I feel government is broad. You have IRA, but IRA alone cannot do the whole work. In fact, I'll give a typical example. When you think about a project, so I've been supporting interconnected mini grids for a very long time. I think Olu can talk about it since basically kickstarting a lot of the conversations around interconnected mini grids in my previous role. And right now at GIAP, I'm still supporting that. But I keep learning every day. In fact, just last year, and one of the developers we're working with is also here in the room. And I found out that, there's an agency that is critical to, basically endorsing something across the chain of the life cycle. And over the how many years that I've been working with, discos and this thing on interconnected, I never.
They were just in the cooler.
So when you think about the government, there are so many aspects, and that's that part of. They may not necessarily be in the energy sector or ministry, but it's everybody else. So how do we connect the dots? Because it has a role to play in how fast we move. And how fast you move, and Femi had said the time is very important. In fact, time is everything. Because, for instance, also giving an example, certain projects that, we had started maybe, years ago, that's when COVID met us. And then all of a sudden, the development stalled. And then we now had the Ukraine war and all that. So you can see these externalities that you did not anticipate, but they are playing a major role in delaying projects. But imagine if a project that started maybe 2 years earlier had been completed, you're just operating and your exposure to some of these risks is reduced. That's just an example of how time is even very important in that funding. And if you don't roll out these projects, then funders will also not come because they don't know what is working. And I think Olu has spoken about that in terms of business models and being able to. So in a nutshell, I would say on top of those, regulatory approvals and connecting the dots across all agencies, there's an aspect also of, and I think Femi already mentioned in terms of capacity building for everyone. So how are you empowering people to be able to deliver accountability and transparency? And I think a few days ago I saw the MD of REA posted a report on the capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that very, very encouraging because you're being transparent about the capital. What's it called?
Capital project.
Yes,
Capital
exactly.
projects.
Capital projects and saying how the money has been spent, what has been the impact. Those are the kind
Members of the press.
yes. So those are the kind of signals that funders want to see because okay, we can trust you to this is what basically you're showing accountability for those funds. So it's very important in terms of communicating success stories, and that's what encourages and attracts funders. But then let me go also towards the aspect of I would say looking at when we talk about value for money part and also in terms of accountability and just ensuring better utilization of the funds. Efficiency is an important factor. How are we spending? How are we spending the money well? Effectiveness is also another important factor. Are we spending it wisely? Very smartly. I would say economies as well. That's to what extent are we able to achieve economies of scale? In because if you're able to bring down the cost of certain things, then that improves the commercial aspects of that initiative and all that. So when you think about that from a government perspective and of also development partners, one of the other strategies would be employing some, I would say, tenders. That procurement approaches is also a solid one because you know that, for instance, you are, and I'll give an example of the NEP and DARES. Femi was talking about how merging grants and saying more grants are needed and more support, and GAP is already supporting to some extent, but we hope that we can do more. But ultimately, that allows for a platform approach for blending of financing. So, and he also mentioned the aspect of the capital stack. So people want to know, financiers want to know what's the role of the subsidies in the whole stack. Then we can figure out okay what needs to be filled. Debt financing, working capital, and I'll give a typical example of how we've been doing this in the NEP program with. So we have a working capital facility, and that's with Olon, and it basically provides equipment funding, equipment financing for developers to deploy their projects. So ultimately, if you as a developer, you need, to be able to procure some assets to deploy. Because NEP and some of these tender programs require you to, it's performance based. So you need to already have deployed to now claim there's a gap, in terms of you need to. So that's the way we have synergized to make sure projects roll out as quickly as possible. So people come, they request the funding, they get
qualify.
So now, and then that speaks to the second thing that Femi said in terms of due diligence. So at the onset, we were having a bit of, like, not necessarily clash, but just not well integrated, and that's about the fact that they have pre-qualified with REA and the whole structure, and then coming to the facility again, and they are going through. So those were some of the learnings and the insights, a lot of conversations with Ari, and realized that, okay, how do we streamline this so that it's not too repetitive because it's the same people coming in, and that has since been adjusted and improved. So those kind of platforms and tenders and programs that allow for these different parties to plug in is a significant way to attract funding. And then lastly, when I look at the from the developer side, I think that aggregation is a solid strategy to, for instance, pipelines. You want to be able to present pipelines of projects, but they must be investable. And that speaks to what we've all spoken about in terms of scale. So funders, and I'm sure a lot of us that have had to engage with funders at some points where they say, oh, we want big ticket sizes. That was what I used to hear back in the day. You're wondering that, are we not trying to work towards the same thing?
What exactly is
what
big
exactly
ticket?
is
What do you want?
Because I'm
You know?
an engineer, so I'm not also a finance person, right? But I had to engage with different funders, commercial banks, go to train them, make them understand. That was back in the day, and you're wondering what do you mean? But we've also seen that it does help, because speaking to when you talk about streamlining and all of those efficiency, I remember one of the financiers said the level of effort and cost we have to put into do our due diligence for one project is the same that we do for multiple projects. So we'd rather do multiple projects because we're spending efficiently. So that kind of made me understand. Oh, I see. So ultimately, I would say that we basically all just need to work together to find a way to move ahead. But streamlining those processes, integrating properly is a key part of the work. But developers definitely need to work towards building that portfolio, aggregating their projects in a way that financiers find it attractive enough to be able to support, faster and quicker to achieving the scale.
And even just talking about portfolios and cost of doing business as well on the side of the development financiers as well. So it's you're invariably saying it makes more sense to do much more once it's more, aggregated. Can I get the microphone on my left hand side, because I have two people on this side who indicated that they had questions, and one gentleman on this side. So can I get the microphone, please? So as we begin to pack, as we begin to, do you pack the plane or you try to land the flight? Either ways, as we try to get to that point, let us now go deep into the stakeholder engagement part of this. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Ejike Umunabike Jr. I'm a journalist. Must first appreciate the organizers of this power dialogue session, which is most enthralling and experience field. My first question goes to the head of NEP. And judging from from the key performance indicators I have witnessed since he assumed office as the head of that, management unit, I think he has done incredibly well, and I'm impressed. And this is also
That's a good place to clap, please.
yes,
Thank you.
This is also attested to by a few assignment schedules I have been involved in, where he had to preside over issues and values, norms that define the sociology of rural electrification. My question to him is, flowing from the central topic of the dialogue session, bridging the electrification gap in rural communities, what is your candid opinion? In your own candid opinion, what should be the proactive synergy between mini-grid developers and allied service providers as ways of achieving the desired milestones? That's for the head of the NEP.
When you say other service providers, who are you referring to,
When
so
you
that
talk about
we're
service,
able to answer it?
yes, let me give some clarification here. When you talk about service providers, you talk about there are in the chain of offering services, you have the developers, you have some other stakeholders whose services are well defined and streamlined in such ways or manner that their input processes can be categorized based on their environment. So that's what I mean by service providers.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The second question goes to Auntie
Fauzia.
Fauzia.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Did he just say auntie?
Let's make it quick so that we can
Okay, yes.
gather a couple
Yes.
questions.
From the benefit of your intellectual property research work and training in the energy sector, what would be your honest projective solutions that the federal government can initiate or adopt in finding amenable solutions to the electrification gap in rural communities? Because they say in psychology that environment affects behavior.
I'm not sure I got the question.
Interesting. Thank you so much for that question, sir. Brilliant. I think, please, just before you leave that session, I think I saw another hand. Okay, I think we may have answered your question in the course of this last session. Thank you. So I think there was one hand this way. Please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, David, for the invite. It's been really great listening and learning from everyone. I've worked in the industry for about 10 years and on rural electrification companies. I'd studied Netherlands to meet FRES, Foundation for Rural Energy Services. That was one of the first early on investors in mini grids across the continent. I think they're in 5 countries. And also to Tanzania to meet Jumeme. And studying other actors in the space. And one of the things that became very clear is that profitability was a big concern. And at the time, the Tanzanian government actually also, policy-wise, made a big mistake, and Jumeme came out more or less crumbling, and they started selling fish. They went into the fish business from selling energy because it was really tough at the time. And they now expanded into CNI. So my question is around profitability, because there's been mention around if there is profit financing and scalability, and we can have more investors, right? There's been a lot of call for investors. I can tell us that indeed investors are open to investing. A lot of them are putting their money now in the CNI space. That's where my company, Growth Energy, is very active in 5 African countries, and we have a portfolio of more than $40 million of CNI projects. We're working with financiers like Empower and others. But if you look at early on investors like SEMA fund, SEMA has now launched the CNI fund. So we're seeing now a trend where some of these early on investors in rural electrification are now investing in CNI. Many of the private investors and a lot of the investment coming into rural edification is around grant and blended finance, catalytic finance. The philosophy is different. One is corporate finance, the other one is project finance. Corporate finance is a bit more difficult because you have to take a risk in the future. So my question is, if it's profitable, we are happy to invest in this space. We're happy to collaborate with players, local companies, to do this together. Just to round up, we started in Burundi looking at rural electrification. We went into the space. I went around Burundi with my team, and we decided to focus on CNI. And in 3 years, we had built a portfolio of about $25 million. We may have needed a lot more time and very much difficult journey in accessing financing if it was rural education. So I believe that Nigeria has done a lot. I'm very impressed because 10 years ago, Nigeria was not even on the mention. A lot of African countries were doing great. Ghana has done a lot, Kenya as well, Tanzania, a number of markets. But Nigeria just really became really active around 5 years ago, and a lot has happened. We invested in some of the early on companies like Green Elect in my previous role, and a lot of other companies as well. So my question is how profitable, it's really around profitability is, and this is to really around profitability. What are the numbers looking like? And how can we come in, some of the players that are a bit where we're in Europe, how can we come in to raise more financing around profitability? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I think Olu is going to shout data protection.
I have one gentleman in front here who also has another question. So we'll take that, 2 from the audience online. Then you have a question as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Itsu from Niger State. I'm the Director General of Public-Private Partnership.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason why I'm here today is to see how the state can leverage on the prospective investors because into the state in terms of mini grids and rural electrifications.
Okay.
And whenever we have engagement with them, at the end of the day, we couldn't find them again because of some certain issues. After doing our own part as a public sector, we find the private investors, we couldn't see them again because the last engagement is that we did what we call clustering of our metering systems in the state by making sure that some of our public institutions have been clusters that we can have know the amount of energy consumptions and the kind of what it takes to power those public institutions. And I think it's profitable because of what we get from convention, that is AEDC, and what with those investors, you can see that there are a lot of opportunities. But the challenges that we're having is that whenever we engage a lot of private investors, after doing some due diligence, you couldn't find them. I don't know actually what the problem is. And we're trying to see how we can find prospective investors through these platforms so that they can come to the state because we're domesticating this new Electricity Act. The states already passed into law how the state can generate its own electricity.
You have come to the right place, and you would live with a solution.
Thank you.
I guarantee you. Please. Thank you. Evening.
My name is Chris Wachuku, and I'm a developer. Yeah, so first and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers for keeping the fire burning for over 8 years. And then secondly, I would like to thank Femi for his opening accolades for developers. Trust me, I'll be speaking on behalf of developers. We don't get that a lot. I mean, we get really demonized a lot. So getting an accolade from you really is something that I want to really appreciate, right? I have a question for everyone on the panel. 3 for Femi, 1 for one for Fauzi.
Give us the hottest one.
Don't worry, I'll make it very short. One for my fellow developer, Olu. Yeah, so first and foremost, I think this is a very, very good family meeting. We have a family with 4 critical kids. I'm not including you. 4 critical kids. And I think even the way the seat is arranged, there's a missing seat here. The reason I'm saying there's a missing seat is because we all understand the role of the last child. And the last child in this contest would be the local financiers. I mean, I've been a developer for over 10 years, and for every opportunity I get, I tend to, allude the fact that the role of the local financier in the value chain can never be overemphasized, right? If you look at what has happened in the East African market, they were very critical in scaling up the sector. So this is a message to the organizers. Please, for every mini grid related dialogue, please.
Family meeting.
Keep a seat for the last child. Because everybody on this panel is, advancing and, evolving, except the last child. And it is critical that we handhold the last child
and bring them in the conversation.
Yeah, because, thank you. I mean, the importance of their role cannot be overemphasized. So, going quickly to my question. Question number 1 to Femi would be, I want to thank you for all you're doing as the HPMU. Then also, as we are about to launch the directs, I keep saying this to my fellow developers that the current number of developers we have in Nigeria can't even scratch the surface. Trust me, I've lived most of my life in the bush. You understand what that is. So, I mean, you're busy developing a project in one remote community, and you're being swamped by 10 other communities who need these services. So, what is your strategy to make sure that we get on board more developers, especially riding on all these grants and catalytic capital that is in the space at the moment, And trust me, I know that this will not last, right? We're not going to have grants and catalytic funding forever. But what we can do in Nigeria is to utilize this opportunity to grow the space both in numbers and technical capacity. So, what is your office doing to make sure that you encourage
The emergence of new
emerging
developers
new
in the state.
developers? Because I mean, we're getting old and we need to also come this time, right? So that's the first question. And then the second question is it borders on the environment, right? I think during the scorecard of REA, the NEP had a scorecard of about 130 milligrids or thereabout, right? So how is your office and REA at large, mapping these mini grids? Because already in the market, I mean, most batteries that come into the country, nobody is mapping where these batteries are headed, and that's a big mess on its own. And it would be, quite unfair to these remote villages and Nigerians at large that we deploy mini grids without tracking, batteries when they were deployed, their end of life, and what is the retrieval processes
E-waste management.
To manage that waste. It's important that we also include that as part of the DARES program, right? So let it not be as if I'm bashing you. So let me just move to Fauzia. Fauzia, Fauzia, you've been with the development partners for a long time, right? Even in your previous role and your current role, you understand the immense pressure, demand for data and reports, the kind of pressure it puts on developers. The truth is, not all developers are like the hosts, the sea solars of the world. We have developers who have, only about 4 or 5 employees. That's the truth, right? And when you put that immense pressure of, deploying projects, preaching that we should invite the last child to panels, and then also reporting, it becomes very hectic. I mean, we are doing a lot, as it may, right? And I feel we should find a way to leverage on a lot of things, including technology. I mean, I think there is API integration these days that you can use to even get this data on your own without putting so much pressure on the developer. Finally, Olu, my brother. Olu, so without divulging so much IP, right? So can you tell us how you navigate capacity utilization issue and lesson? I mean, you've been in the sector for a while. So what has been your lesson with regards to capacity utilization, and how are you evolving to be able to cross that serious barrier? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a number of questions, and we'll try to see how our panelists can answer them in short bullet points in seconds. When we call this a family meeting, we know why we called it a family meeting, and we're very grateful to you for your participation. So, starting from Femi, please feel free to give some responses to the questions you've received. Then we'll come to Fauzia, Olu, before we give our parting words and try to really land this flight. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I have to first acknowledge all the accurate and good words that I heard. When my brother, Mr. Ejike, started his question, my heart was about to drop. I hope I haven't
It
done
comes with
something wrong.
accolades, then they heat it up.
But your question was around, I guess, the stakeholder matrix around the mini grid developers. And really, that's a very critical aspect of the deployment. Stakeholder matrix from the REA to the regulators who are the NEC to the communities, agreements that developers sign with the communities. If you agree to provide 10 hours of electricity, ensuring that you stick to those agreed terms and conditions. And then going to the other side of things that I spoke about earlier, collaboration with other service providers, productive use of equipment providers to make your mini grids more, increase your capacity utilization. Other service providers also include a certain aspect that we tend to overlook, which is as we are all shouting that we want to scale, is there enough expertise in the market? Are there enough hands? Have we built enough capacity across board in order to be able to operate and maintain these assets for us across board? So it's a joint thing where I feel the government and the developers need to work together in ensuring that as you go into communities, you're also helping to share some knowledge, capacity building. You are also touching their lives. You are giving them a means of livelihood. We developers go to places where normal people would never want to go, right? And ensuring that this comes from ground up, right, would have a lasting effect on everyone. There was a question from Niger State, and this is very important because I've seen in the past few months a lot of states have taken advantage of the new Electricity Act in trying to set up their own electricity market. While there's one conversation around, as a state, if I'm jumping to set up my own electricity market, I must understand that I'm taking both the assets and the liabilities. So the shortfalls every month that the federal government has been chesting, let me use that word, for the states, directly goes to you immediately. Do you have the balance sheets to support this? And that's just on the side. But on the more critical note, in terms of attracting potential investors, developers, the electricity plan, national electricity plan that we're working on, will help to bring everybody to the table. We understand that states are in a hurry and want to get things going because they are closest to the people on the ground and they feel the pain. But we're also trying to work as fast as we can to ensure that we're also able to build capacity in-house. There's certain things that the investors want to see is all around data. Do you have the data? How many states know the grid connection and the transmission lines, disco lines, reticulation around their states? Let's even start with that. How many states have the figures around how many people are off grid, how many people are on the grid, and those kind of things? They love to see data. And this is what we're trying to drive from the center down. And we'll continue to collaborate. I think we've been meeting with a lot of states. We're also trying to, not even trying, the vice president has approved a collaboration with NEC. We also met with the Governors Forum as well to see how we can take this from grounds up. A few years ago, we had an electrification plan that was really just a document because, the popular saying, we were not carried along, right? So we are trying to reverse that trend now and ensure that from day one, we're carrying all the stakeholders along. So you mentioned about local financiers, and that's next seat. And my comment around that would really go around the fact that we need to be more adaptable across board. The off-grid space is a unique market. You can't treat this product the same way you treat every other product. And I think that's the same mistake financiers have been trying to make over the years, trying to treat it as that regular, just use the regular templates. No, they need to also do the work, right? Because over the years, we've shown that the money you put in, you are getting back. That the revenue assurance, at least to a certain extent, we've been able to show. So it now goes out to these local financiers to try and come down to our level, right, from the high horses, to try and adapt to the ecosystem, not giving where it doesn't even make sense and you're not even understanding the nitty-gritty of this unique ecosystem. So I think that is another, charge to them. And even to the international ones as well. You don't sit behind a laptop thousands of miles away and want to direct how operations run here. The developers, even more than us, the REA, are the ones that know what's going on ground, right? So they should be able to come down to this level again if we're really serious about pushing this forward. Everybody needs to collaborate on that level.
E-waste management,
Yes.
and new developers on the scene.
Yes. And in terms of getting new developers on board, my first reaction to that would be it's quality over quantity, because you have a unique ecosystem that you and lots of very, very brave individuals have built, right? You open the floodgates, and potentially there's that risk of people infiltrating quality control, and a host of other issues, right? While I'm not saying that we don't need more people, but we need to be careful how we expand also. And that's why we've gone with this renewable energy service company model, where we tie you to a portfolio of projects. It does a few things. It answers what the financiers want to see in terms of big ticket projects when you aggregate. And it does another thing in ensuring that it's only the right people, right, that will let into this space. Capacity building also for you as well, because what we see is that the so-called big boys, right, whether it is from the oil and gas sector and all of that, are all interested in coming into this space now because of what you have, because of the path you've paved, right? So you have that first mover advantage. There's room for collaboration. There's no reason why you can't collaborate with one of the big boys, as you call them, and see value, win-win, both ways. You get what I mean? So we need to open our mind in this regard. You spoke about 130 mini grids. I was going to correct that back to data again. It's now over 158 mini grids.
Round of applause, please.
And
excellent.
Very important point you made around the environmental issues. And you'd see that's why the DES has an updated ENS guidelines and safeguards that everybody have to comply with, even with the developers that are going to be coming on board on the DES. They have to all sign new agreements in line with what you just mentioned. And I also see opportunities here in terms of I don't see enough recycle plants around.
E-waste
This
management
is
companies.
business. This is in every issue, in every problem. I always just see opportunities, right? So this is another sector where you might probably want to invest in the next few months. Yours are full. Fantastic.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
So thank you very
so much for your responses. Fauzia, in a few seconds. I know it's tough, but we are out of time, and I think we're just having a bit of a cloud before we land this flight. So we'll just take the few minutes we have while we speak with the control tower. Your thoughts, please, on your general on the questions that were asked, and also on what for those in development financing. How do you want to see things differently? And critically answer the question: what role can private sector play? More importantly, in advancing the sector and even supporting the emergence of new clean energy companies on the scene.
Yeah, okay. So let me start with that. I think everything Femi has said and Olu has said as well is literally it. The private sector is very important to us achieving anything we want to achieve in this space, to be honest. And that's why, I started off by saying part of why we're here is to ensure that, we're able to unlock private investments and all of that. So that's key. In terms of what can be done, so I'll give an example of one of the initiatives that we are supporting as GAP. And we have this innovation hub that we're funding with our partner Olon, and that's just one of it. And what they're doing is entities developers are able to absorb access to finance. Sometimes the funding is there. The funding is there, but there's also another layer of even accessing it, and that's where a lot of these, internal capacity of the developers needs to be built, and that's why I completely align with what Olu said earlier and the kind of supports, and I really believe that a lot of support needs to be, directed towards, the private sector to build their capacity to absorb the funding that is available and much more that's coming, even with theirs and all of the other programs that are coming. So that's what I wanted to highlight.
I think you've done a great job. Thank you. Olu, profitability. And also, there's a question that came from the audience online that how can they get Hawks appliances? So you may want to answer those two questions.
Okay, so I'm going to link profitability with capacity utilization, and I'll refer you to a document that is free online, written by our CEO Manoj Sinha, our Chief Marketing Officer William Brett, and our Chairman, who was IPO two companies on the New York Stock Exchange, Brad Matson. And in there are certain CSFs, critical success factors, which we've highlighted. CUF is one of them. LCOE is another one. And, 2 years ago, we were the first mini grid company to declare profitability at EBITDA level, right? In two continents. It's a lot of work. We've been building mini grids since 2008. And it's a lot of pulling of levers. I'm sure if you're a finance person, you understand. And that journey hasn't been easy. Now it is on the pathway to full profitability, which is where we are now. So is this sector profitable? Yes, it is, right? If we will still be here since 2008, almost 300 mini grids in India, and almost more than 10% of that in Nigeria as well, and growing. And we're looking to other markets like DRC. It is profitable, right? It is just a question of the right business model. We've decided to take a platform approach, and that is coming to question around appliances. We didn't just start selling appliances because we want to be a Samsung or LG or any of those companies, but we see the opportunities there to be able to. If you're in the startup space, there's something called customer lifetime value, right? I want to be the guy he trusts. I'm selling power. He wants a TV. I'm the guy. He wants a fan. He wants a phone. He wants a refrigerator. It is me. He's not going anywhere. So we are helping him grow. And as he's growing, of course, we are growing as well, right? So that is how we've looked at that journey. In terms of capacity utilization, it is back to my comment around the two key things for mini grids. Not everywhere needs mini grids. Not everywhere. Some places need solar home systems, and then they grow, right? And if you look at it that way, and I think Engie has taken a very great model. They do mini grids and they do SHS as well. So they're looking at, if we are not here doing mini grids, then we are here doing solar home systems. And over time, there could be growth. If you look at the solar home systems companies, you could also look at the size of their systems increasing because the customers now need more. Over the last 5 years, the sale of solar home systems has declined. It is not because they are not selling, it is because the customers want more to do with power and they are transiting, right? So we have to look at that where solar home systems need to go, mini grids need to go. And if you do the right things, the right top-down, bottom approach, the right business model, and understanding, it's also a lot of data and understanding and financial metrics. A lot of engineers think it's all technical. Yes, partially, but there's also finance. But in doing that, your CUF then begins to look good.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Friends, change makers, enthusiasts, ladies and gentlemen, joining us virtually and also in the room, you would agree with me that this has been stakeholder engagement. And of course, you agree with me that right here in this room, we've been able to provide solutions. We've been able to ensure that we've been able to share learnings. We've been able to see that this sector is really working. And we need you to continue to do what we are doing and advance in the sector. To our panelists, from Mr. Femi to Ms. Fauzia to Mr. Olu, we can't thank you enough. And it's been such a pleasure. Feel free, we have some refreshment at the back once we close today's meeting. Feel free to network, meet a new friend, exchange a business card. And until next time, until next month, the Electricity Dialogue presents another edition, which would be, of course, an exciting one. I'll tell you, we'll pause here. and continue next month. I am David Arinze. It's been a pleasure moderating this session. Thank you so much for having me. Emeka, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, panelists. Round of applause for them, please. All right, so really, real quick, I know we're out of time, but we do this dialogue for a few reasons. And one of the reasons is to engage and have conversations, have a family meeting like David said. So please don't leave here without networking with each other and really getting to know who is in the room, because you never know if your next job is here or your next project. There are three big takeaways from this session, and it's around data. First, data is king. Second is capacity building. We must get more people in the sector. As you said, one mini grid developer starts a project, 10 more people show up that they need the same thing. So we must get that done, and money. We must get financing into the sector, and we must do it in a way where people can actually spend. Because there's instances where there's money available, but there's no capacity to do the work. So please, let's keep talking, because we will, with partnerships, we can go further. This is the 98th Power Dialogue. In November, we'll be having our 100th edition, which will be held somewhere in Abuja. It's not quite confirmed yet, but it'll be our 100th Power Dialogue, and we'll like your support. Thank you for coming, and have a fantastic evening. I have to say you there and kill.